Welcome back, year 4. We're now going to hear that story about a man and his boy who lived in those mountains in Italy where I used to live, and they would have been there about nearly 4,000 years ago. The man was a hunter and a fisher, and he used to use line and hooks for fish, and he used to use a bow and arrow, and his boy used to go with him. And later in their lives they moved from Switzerland, or the border between Italy and Switzerland, all the way to where we are now in England. And they found the man's grave 18 years ago near a place called Stonehenge, that big stone circle. And in a grave quite close by, the grave of his son. Now, I heard this story and I'd like to think it's true, but it's all about how this bird, the robin, got its red markings, its red breast just here, and here's the tail. It is said that the man used to go with his boy all the way up the big steep valley along that river Sesia that I used to live near, up into the mountains. And where that big white Monte Rosa is, there are some lakes. And what the hunter used to do was wait until the deep cold of winter would freeze the surface of the lake. Then he would build a little hut, and he and his boy would stay in the hut at night, but in the daytime the hunter would go out on the ice with big special flat shoes, they wouldn't fall in. He would smash a hole in the ice with his spear and then let his line and hook down and catch the fish, bring them back in the evening to the little hut, and they would hang them to dry near the fire. Now, the fire had 2 jobs to do. Yes, it dried the fish, which they would then take back down to their village at the end of the hunting season, but also the fire, which was placed between the hut and the edge of the lake, was there to keep the bears away, because in that valley and all the valleys nearby, big black and brown bears used to live. And just as the winter was beginning, they would get under the ground and go and sleep somewhere, but before then they were eating as much as they could. And the hunter knew that the bears could smell them and see them, but if they had a fire, they'd be too frightened to come near. So the fire wasn't to keep them warm, it was to keep them alive. And so when the hunter was out in the daytime, walking over the ice, breaking the ice, fishing, catching the fish, his son, who at that time was about 6 years old, his job was to keep the fire going. So whilst Dad was out on the ice, he'd be around and about, maybe in the woods, gathering dry wood, constantly feeding the fire. But also he was a bit alone, really. I mean, he had got no one to speak to, no friends came with him. Dad was out on the ice all day long, but he made a friend. This little bird here began to hop around and get very comfortable with the boy, and used to come up and feed from his hand even, and then jump on his shoulder, and then the bird would sing and gossip, and there was lots of things to say all day long, and the boy was very happy. This was his little friend. But one day Dad got ill. He must have caught a big cold, a bronchitis or something, and he was coughing and spluttering, and he said, I can't get out anymore. He said, I've got to rest in the hut. So he crawled into the hut, got into his bed, didn't get out of it for days and weeks. And he kept saying to his boy, "Keep the fire going, otherwise the bears will come." And sure enough, whilst the boy was out there feeding the flames with the wood he'd got, he could see one particular big brown bear who must have smelt them one day and thought to itself, "Aha! A man and his boy. I will get them one day, and that will be lunch and dinner in one go. Ah!" So the boy was desperate to keep the fire burning, and he did that all day long and in the night as well, and then he'd go into the hut, make sure his dad was still okay, and then come out, and in the daytime the little bird would flit around and try and help him and keep him company. But gradually the wood was running out. He couldn't go into the woods anymore because he had to look after his dad, and the fire was getting lower and lower, and his dad was still very ill and not recovering, and he was wondering what he was going to do. And then one day the boy said, "I've got to stay in the hut, I can't worry about the fire." And the bear looked and thought, "Aha! The fire is getting low. I am not so frightened of a small fire, and the boy is inside the hut. I'll creep up and I'll get them both." And the bear began to get closer and closer around the shore of the frozen lake. But the little bird, the little brown bird, thought, "This is no good. I must do what I can for my little friend." And the little brown bird hopped down near the fire and began to flap his wings. And the flapping air made the flames go up again. And when they started to come down, he would get close and flap his wings and flap his wings. And it was very hot, but he didn't care. He was doing this for his friend. And the bear was getting closer and closer, and he was thinking, "That little brown bird will run out of breath one day, and then I shall leap on them all." And he was ready to pounce, when inside the hut one morning Dad woke up and said, "I feel better. Whoa, I feel much better. I'm going to go outside." And he climbed outside, and the fire was nearly out, and the little bird was just about able to flap. And he quickly picked up his bow and his arrow, and he looked and saw the bear, and he pulled the string back and he had his arrow ready, and the bear saw and thought, "Oh no, the hunter is alive and well, and he has a bow and arrow." And the bear turned and ran into the woods, and they never saw it again. And the man put down his bow and arrow. His boy came and stood next to him, and the little bird went, "Oh, can I stop now? I can't flap any more." And the man said, "Good bird, great friend, you have saved us both. By keeping the fire going, you kept the bear away for just long enough. I thank you." And the bird hopped on the little boy's shoulder and was very pleased with himself. And then the boy looked and said, "You've changed. You look different." And for the first time, he noticed that here was all red. And his father said, "And do you know why that's happened?" "No," said the boy. "Why?" "Because your friend, the brown bird, got so close to the fire, he was almost burned. It was so hot. That is why, even today, we see the little robin and the redbreast, and that's why they have them. All thanks to that little brown bird in those big mountains long, long ago. Now, the next thing is we're going to talk about rivers. And of course, there's a story about a river. I'll see you in a minute.